And all of a sudden, someone had said yes, and now I had a whole different problem that I had no money. But President Hines called a meeting, and he brought in Barry Thompson, who was the chancellor of the university system, myself, and Merriman Morton from Texas Commerce Bank, and he gave his vision for Prairie View. And at the end of it, it was a fire and brimstone speech. He looked at me and said, "Mr. Bayless, will you build the housing?" "Yes, sir, we will." Turned to his chancellor and said, "Chancellor Thompson, do I have your support?" "Yes, you do." The bank, Merriman Morton, stood up and said, "Yes, we'll finance it." And so I don't know how he got it through credit committee, but the first development deal American Campus did, Texas Commerce Bank loaned 100% loan to cost. That's unheard of.
This is still one of the craziest
parts
of the whole story to me.
Imagine having a dream of starting an industry that doesn't exist, aspiring to be the Disney of that industry, and then one day being hired by Disney just before selling your dream for $13 billion. Today's guest, Bill Bayless, tells that true story and more as he talks about hard work, family, culture, and the importance of believing in your dream. Be sure to like and subscribe so that we can continue to bring more stories just like this to you. And here's Bill's story.
First combo of the new year, so we're really excited to kick it off with you. We've been looking forward to this interview for a while, and I think if we just honestly started from the beginning of your journey, we're here in Austin, Texas, and you started in a small town in West Virginia.
Small town in West Virginia. First, thank you all for inviting me to do this. It's a true pleasure.
Yeah, well, we're excited, man. We're excited.
No, so Austin is home now, but I was born and raised in a small town of 5,000 people, Wellsburg, West Virginia, right on the Ohio River, about 35 miles from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Blue-collar town. Dad was a steel worker. Grandfather was a steel worker. I worked in a paper factory early in my career. But Mom was Italian, one of 11 children. And so we had a big family, had a couple dozen first cousins, all the aunts and uncles, everybody lived within a 2 to 3 block radius. You ate incredibly all the time at every house, but also you could get spanked for the same thing at 3 different houses based on which cousins you were with.
Yeah.
But just an incredible place to grow up. Wonderful mother and father. My dad was my first mentor. My mother was just as caring and supportive as she could have been, and just so blessed. And my dad had a brother who had 4 girls, and then I had 3 older sisters. Wow. And so I was the first boy of a line of 7 to carry on the name, and so big pressure there.
Yeah.
But just a wonderful childhood in a blue-collar town.
Did you guys have some like unbelievable Thanksgivings or Christmases?
Unreal, unbelievable. My grandmother, Santa Machete, she lived about 2 blocks away, and so on Sundays the families would take turn going to see her, and she'd have the homemade pasta going all the time. And so traditional Italian wedding soup you would make during the holidays. Okay. I made it over Christmas.
Okay.
And so just incredible, wonderful, wonderful childhood.
Wow.
And so, grew up, the stories you hear, you get on your bike, 8 o'clock in the morning when the street lights came on is when you'd start to come home, and just a great place to grow up.
Yes.
And then uniquely to me, so I went to Catholic school, grades 1 through 8.
Okay.
And interesting, I played basketball there, and I'm 5'6". I was 5'6" in 7th grade, so I haven't grown since 7th grade. So I actually played.
I'm the same way.
But I played center on the basketball team in grade school.
Yeah.
And the team was 0-22.
Okay.
And so I always, it was a very important part of my career development that I absolutely learned to lose with grace and with dignity. And then I went to the public high school, Brooke High School, which was an extremely large school, about 500 in my graduating class. Yeah. AAA school, as big as West Virginia gets. And played football there in an incredible football program. Coach Paul Bud Billiard, who was one of my other mentors, a huge influence in my life. And we lost the state championship my junior year. We lost the semifinal of the state championship my senior year. And so it was a great experience, and football was part of an incredible winning program that was dominant in the state. Earlier, the elementary school, 0-22, and so really learned how to lose and how to win with grace and humility.
Yes.
And so those two sports influences were very influential on me. My high school coach, and I love to tell the story. So I grew up in the Ohio Valley, blue-collar town. It was a really big deal to go away to college. And we had lost a game in my junior year, one of the rare losses we had to Wheeling Central. Mm-hmm. And Monday at practice, coach was just driving us into the ground. And everybody's just dying and working hard. And he stops practice, blows the whistle, and he's like, don't you all understand what this is about? It's not about football. This is about life. This is about setting goals. This is about getting out of the valley and doing something with your life. Mm. And I really, he spoke to me that day, and I really took it to heart. And so the lessons of sports growing up, from team and collaboration and playing a role, had a huge influence later on in my career, and as my life evolved.
Yeah, I feel like there was a specific line you shared when we first met that he had about the difference winning and losing. It
was how a man plays the game shows something of his character. How he loses shows all of it.
That was it.
And so, very, very profound. It was on a poster I believe in the coach's room. Never knew where it came from. It was anonymous. And then the other one I had a coach that became my life's motto, said at one practice, if it's to be, it's up to me. And so literally my son has it tattooed on his arm. But that was my life's motto. If it's to be, it's up to you individually just to make it happen, to believe it.
Wow.
And so
there's some of the foundational pieces for you, driving you.
Just wonderful influences.
Yeah. I would imagine too, even it sounds like Dad and Grandpa, like a work ethic, a consistency from them.
When I left, and I never, ever in my wildest dreams, ever envisioned that I would have the career that I had. And I always say that my success is my mother and father's, truly. And ultimately we're all measured in our own personal success by the character and the accomplishments of the children that we raise. And so every award or any accolades that I've ever received, I've always said, that's a tribute to Buck and Lucille. They're the ones that deserve all that. And my dad, when I was leaving West Virginia and coming to Texas for the first time, spent 2 years in Houston, he looked at me and said, son, just outwork people, just outwork them. And that blue collar mentality, really just goes a long way. Not the smartest guy in the room by far, but if you just work hard and believe, always believe, things will come together.
Wow.
And so it happened later for me. When I went off to college, West Virginia University, Mountaineer. And originally wanted to major in criminology, and I wanted to be in the Secret Service.
Okay.
But at 5'6", protecting the president's kneecaps is not the most glorious job. So then switched over to computer science, and actually did fairly well computer science, but just hated it. Didn't like the aspects of it. Partied way too much my first 2 years of college. And part of what led to my career, in the first semester I got a 1.8, was on academic probation. Didn't rebound. The next semester had another rough one, but I came home between semesters for Christmas. My dad pulled out the report card, threw it down. Very seldom did he curse, but there was a few curse words in there, and he said, I'm done paying for it. It's on you.
Tough love moment.
And so cut me off. Had to fund my own education after that. I became an RA at my student residence hall because I had to. I couldn't afford college without doing that, and so which ultimately did lead to my career. But I really floundered in college, and the first 3 semesters, I didn't know I was going to make it if I'd really graduate. And then met my wife, which turning point in life. Been married 38 years in February. And actually, great story, I was dating her roommate.
Okay.
And so my mother and father were on their way to Florida to go on vacation. I'm like, oh, great, you can stop by and meet my roommate, or meet my girlfriend. And so my mom and dad come down, and my girlfriend comes to meet them, and she brings her roommate, Jamie. And so we have a nice little conversation, spend about an hour together, mom and dad leave, go to Florida. And so they get there, and this is, the old rotary phone days, there's no cell phone. So they call, hey, we got to Florida. I'm like, hey, what do you think of my girlfriend? And my mom said, well, honestly, really didn't care for her. But the blonde that was with her, I absolutely adored. And I was like, hey, you know what? She's better looking, a little nicer. I think you're right. And so pulled the miraculous roommate switch.
Oh my gosh.
There were only roommates for about 2 more weeks after that.
Okay.
And it was a hard convincing.
Their friendship survived that?
It did not.
Yeah.
It did not. It was actually the Halloween dance at our residence hall.
Okay.
And I literally kidnapped my wife, drove her 2 hours away to my mom and dad's home, and convinced her that she should go out with me.
Okay, that's one way to do it.
And we've been together ever since. And so we came back, she broke the news to her roommate, and we have been together ever since.
Like,
and
if
interesting.
it's going to be, it's on me kind of moments.
Absolutely.
Like you just made.
And she would have absolutely ran away if she knew this. But so that was the Halloween dance, which, October 31st, whatever. And I came home Thanksgiving break and laid away the engagement ring. I knew. We just...
It's immediate.
Immediate. Mom picked her. You're right.
Yeah.
We're off to run. And then so I waited till Memorial Day before I asked her to marry me. And
That's smart. Yeah.
Went and asked her mom and dad for permission first. And her father, Jim, was absolutely have our blessing, but with the condition you both have to finish college. And so she was a sophomore. I was beginning my junior year. Made that promise. Went down the road. Came home for Christmas that year, she was pregnant. So plans got moved up. We moved the wedding up to Valentine's Day, and we had our first child in college. Actually, we had both in college, and so our son was born while we were both still students at WVU. Driving home from the hospital that night was a paradigm shift moment for me, and that all of a sudden the responsibility of being a father and having to provide for someone else really light bulb went off in terms of, okay, this is life, this is my responsibility, got to make it happen. 6 months later, she got pregnant for our second child, still in college. Everybody was like, oh my God, what are you doing? But it was just perfect. So our family lived in a residence hall that I was managing, and we're both still going to school, absolutely as poor as we could be. We used to go to McDonald's, we order 2 Happy Meals, we'd give the beef patty to the children. She and I would eat the bun, and we'd all split the fries. Wow. And so, the good fortune, the blessings that we have had are really appreciated in terms of how things came about. And so college was incredible experience also. Had a good time in the early years, really got academically focused after I met my wife. And WVU is just an incredible place. Their marketing program was fantastic. And my career actually formed when I was a resident assistant at Summit Hall. And that, you go back to the 80s, and there wasn't quality student housing. And if you took a college class in real estate, the only mention of student housing was in the Apartment Management 101 textbook. And the author, a gentleman named Edward Kelly, who was the chief author for IREM, the Institute of Real Estate Management, in the chapter that was called Types of Tenants, the last paragraph said, students, and I quote, give me vacancies before you give me students. They won't pay their rent. They'll tear up the property. They have no sense of loyalty. You would rather have a vacant apartment than lease to a student. And so being a marketing finance major and loving where I was living in a residence hall, but when you moved off campus, it was terrible absentee landlords, deplorable accommodations. Really, the vision for what would later become American Campus was formed in college. And so after graduation, I first worked for a hotel company that had a couple student properties, and wasn't a good fit in terms of their culture. It was very much an ivory tower organization, slow down, wait your turn, not very innovative. Then went to work for one of the largest apartment companies in America in Columbus, Ohio, a group called Cardinal Industries, and started a student housing company there with a gentleman named Tom Trubiana, who's also now an Austinite here, who's also a great mentor to me. And that was when the tax laws changed in the 80s, it caused a real estate bust, much like the one we may be leading into right now. And that company unfortunately filed for bankruptcy. Only time in my career I wasn't doing student housing. I worked in that bankruptcy for about 9 months to a year, learned a whole lot. and then moved to Houston to go to work for a company called Century Development, was a big office developer, built the Summit where the Rockets used to play. I think it's now Joel Osteen's church. And built Enron's headquarters.
Yep.
Wow. And yeah.
Wow.
And started a little student housing division there.
Yep.
In all these cases, though, there were big companies that had another core business, and student was, I don't know, go back to that textbook.
Sure.
Not really know if we're into it. And so had a wonderful twist of fate in 1993. Dobie Center here at the University of Texas was actually coming out of a bankruptcy. And a gentleman out of Munich, Germany, named Joseph Domberger, who was a limited partner in Dobie Center, took the property over through the bankruptcy proceedings and was looking for a property manager. And so I ended up, through a twist of fate, meeting Domberger and a partner he had named Wayne Senecal that ran his U.S. operations at Zilker Park. And Sam Glass, an attorney out of Dallas, was involved in it also. And through that conversation, convinced Mr. Domberger to allow me to start what became American Campus Communities to manage Dobie Center. And so we had our first office on the 27th floor of Dobie. Amazingly, Michael Dell started Dell Computer a few years before, right down the hall on that 27th floor.
Same floor.
Same floor.
Wow. Yeah,
Yep.
I know the legendary story, but same floor. That's
amazing.
Crazy. Yeah.
And so, it's later to have two of Austin's public companies both had started
Right.
in that residence hall.
Wow.
And so we started the company, 4 employees. Mr. Domberger was 72 years old at the time. He was divesting of his U.S. real estate, trying to get workouts. At the time, he's like, look, I'm happy to start the company to let you do this management of it, but I don't want to put any equity in. And so we were cash strapped, but it was the opportunity. And so we had a vision. We came up with our mission statement, which is to be the nation's premier provider of quality student housing communities and services through unique understanding of and an unrelenting commitment to students, parents, educational institutions, and investors.
Okay.
And so we had the vision, no money.
Yep.
I used to walk around with poster boards trying to sell to universities and equity sources and lenders on the merits of student housing. Go back to that textbook. Everybody had negative connotations. And finally, the first university that said yes was Prairie View A&M University down near Texas.
If you had to do a quick guess of how many no's you got before that one.
Lord, every 30.
Okay, wow.
And everyone, I kept hearing, man, I'd love to be your second client.
Yeah.
And one of those poster boards, this is one of the coolest parts of the story as we go through it. One of those poster boards was titled The Disney Way. And that because of all the negative connotations that people had of student housing, I would go in and say, hey, everybody's been to Disney World or Disneyland.
Yep.
That's what American Campus is going to be in student housing. We're going to build world-class products. We're going to have an incredible customer service, incredible facilities maintenance, and impeccable grounds. And most importantly, we're going to create an environment that's conducive to academic success. And so ultimately, it's the experience beyond the real estate is the vision.
Yep.
And so President Charles Hines at Prairie View, who was a retired 3-star general, incredible man, said, yes, we'll do the deal. And all of a sudden someone had said yes, and now I had a whole different problem that I had no money. But lo and behold, given the Austin community, Texas Commerce Bank, who now is part of Chase, but Texas Commerce Bank, the chairman at the time was Merriman Morton. A gentleman named Wendell Pardue headed up the real estate division there. And Mr. Domberger and Mr. Senecal and I went and met with them. They were kind of lukewarm, but President Hines called a meeting, and he brought in Barry Thompson, who was the chancellor of the university system, myself, and Merriman Morton from Texas Commerce Bank, and he gave his vision for Prairie View. Which he ultimately achieved. It was very, very ambitious. And at the end of it, it was a fire and brimstone speech. He looked at me and said, Mr. Bayless, will you build the housing? Yes, sir, we will. Turned to his chancellor and said, Chancellor Thompson, do I have your support? Yes, you do. The bank, Merriman Morton, stood up and said, yes, we'll finance it. And so I don't know how he got it through credit committee, but the first development deal American Campus did, Texas Commerce Bank loaned 100% loan to cost. That's unheard of.
This is still one of the craziest
Unheard
parts of the
of.
whole story to me. I just can't.
And so that's was the first development deal that we were able to do
For
at
an
American
unproven
campus.
industry. I'm on top of it.
On a
I'm
ground
just
lease,
like,
which
yeah.
from a conventional real estate perspective, it makes it even more complex.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I'm the most blessed,
Yeah.
lucky human being who ever meet. So
Yeah.
we got the deal done. Back then, the Wall Street Journal used to have an insert that was in the regions. It was the Texas Journal. And there was an article in it about this little innovative deal at Prairie View. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden, my phone started ringing, New York Venture Capital. All of a sudden interested in the space, wanting to get into it. Mr. Domberger was very gracious and look, I don't want to hold you back. If you want to raise the capital and buy us out, be happy to do so. And so went to New York in '97, raised $50 million in venture capital at an incredible, insane cost, 16.87 compounded monthly. But again, this was a industry that didn't exist, and it was viewed as one of the highest risk ventures you get into. But a gentleman named Scott Reckler, Rex & Associates. Scott was actually on 60 Minutes this weekend, talking about New York office market and the office market in general. He's done quite well. But I think I just turned 31, and Scott was 2 years younger than me, running a public company in New York. But he put up $50 million, and we used that to buy out Mr. Domberger and Mr. Senecal. And we went off and started now really doing and growing the company, doing real estate deals. Scott, who I had a real affection for, he ended up becoming very busy, brought in two other gentlemen to run what became a bigger fund. And I didn't get along fantastic with those two fellas. And they were typical New York money managers. And one of the stories I love to tell, Callaway House, Texas A&M, which is now a legacy property that many students and parents here in Austin who've had their sons and daughters go there, have lived there. But I presented the deal to them, and they killed it. Yeah. And they're like, no, there's nothing like this. It's too speculative. Wow. Like, that's the point. There's nothing like it. We're changing the market. We're innovating. Blah blah blah. And so they didn't approve the company investing the equity and owning the deal. Wow. And one of the partners said to me in that meeting, "Oh, Bill, you have forgotten the golden rule." And I'm thinking, love thy neighbor as thyself. And he's like, no, we with the gold make the rules. And so where I was appreciative to have capital and venture capital, and I really had a world of respect for Scott Reckler, from 97 to 03, which was that period of growth, we grew the company about 200 million in assets. Wow. But it wasn't a happy part of my career. I loved what was happening with the team and the team we were building. A young lady, Christy Gordon, came and worked for us for a period of time early in her career as an intern. And we tried to keep her, but she had ambitions, went to Dell. We were still this little fledgling company. Tried to tell her what it was going to be, but she moved on. But we built the company up, and in 2003, the fund that Mr. Reckler had put together, while they had invested $50 million in American campus, all their other investments had been in high tech. And the first tech bust occurred in 01, 02, and all of a sudden that fund was in bankruptcy. Okay. And we were the only asset that was really doing well and worth something. And so we saw it as an opportunity, went to Scott and said, hey, we'd like to take the company public and buy you out. And he needed to sell that. And so it was an incredibly ambitious goal, in that it's very difficult to take a company public. It's even more difficult to take a company public in an industry that does not exist, and being student housing, and an industry that everybody had negative misperceptions about. And so we ambitiously went about it, and lo and behold, through the grace of God, we got the IPO done, and I mean barely, absolutely barely. It's as close to death before it got across the finish line as it could have been. And from a personal perspective, usually when a founder takes a company public, that's the big payday and hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, because that venture capital was 16.87 compounded monthly, all the proceeds from the IPO had actually returned 16.82 to Scott Reckler. And so myself and my team were not in the money at the IPO. And so, but for us, we were creating not just a public company, we're creating an industry.
Right.
And that American Campus's IPO was literally the introduction of student housing to Wall Street, to global investors, and it was the beginning of changing the perspective of how people thought about the industry. And it was just an incredible ride.
Yeah.
And the company and the people.
Did you guys say Google was like on the floor the same
yeah,
week
so
as you
so the
guys?
same week that we, August of '04, Google was going public also.
That's wild.
And so on the
Yeah.
road show, we kept
Yeah.
running into, they did okay.
Yeah,
and
hanging
they
in
didn't have
there.
as much trouble getting theirs done as we did.
Yeah.
But it was just an incredible experience. And being a public company was just a wonderful, wonderful paradigm shift for our company and for the industry. And we had incredible success. It was just, for a while there, we were literally the darlings of Wall Street. And we were able to grow at an incredible rate. So the IPO was only a $200 million IPO, which today you couldn't get done. You got to be at least $1 billion, $1.5 billion. And so we were fortunate to get out. We had two divisions. We built off-campus housing for colleges and university students where we had no formal affiliation with the university, like here at the University of Texas.
Right.
We had 5,000 beds in West Campus that we had acquired and then developed Callaway House Austin.
Yeah.
But then we also had a program which we called ACE, American Campus Equity, where we would privately own and develop on-campus housing. The university would lease us land, and we would privately own it on our balance sheet.
Yep.
And President Michael Crow at Arizona State helped us pioneer that program. And we had a big opportunity there that really aligned well with being a public company. And so in the 17 years that we were public, it was just an incredible ride and opportunity. The thing that we were most proud of at American Campus, I obviously left the company in April of last year, but was not just the financial success, but the quality of the organization that we were able to build here in Austin, and a part of it being the great talent base here in Austin, and all the folks that came into the organization. Forbes named us one of America's most 100 trustworthy companies. Newsweek then in 22 also named us one of America's most trusted companies. National Association of Home Builders, we're the development firm of the year in all sectors, student, single family. In 2022, the property management firm of the year, National Association of Home Builders. And so just an incredible quality organization all the way around, and just a tribute to all the people that were part of the American Campus family, all the incredible members of my executive team that really carried me. Again, I got a lot of accolades, but it was always, anytime I was awarded anything or received honors, it was truly a reflection of a collaboration of an incredible group of people that just came together to really do something special and different. Now, my favorite part of the American Campus story is that Disney poster board.
Yes.
In that in our 25th year, we get a call from a gentleman named George Kalogridis, who is the president of Walt Disney World. And George asked if we'd ever heard of the Disney intern program. I'm like, no, sir, we haven't. And he explained that for 40 years, a big part of Disney's workforce is they do college internships for juniors and seniors and also recent graduates that at any given point in time is between 8,000 and 10,000 Disney employees that work in all aspects of their business, and students and recent graduates from all over the world. And that's how they, all their languages and all the services. They work in the hotels, in the park, everywhere. And George explained he was part of the Disney College program and rose to be the president, so it was also their feeder system. And they had, for over 40 years, been leasing apartments all over Orlando, and were busing all of these interns to all places in the parks and the hotels. The students that were still in college could go to what they call Disney University and get credit. And George has explained that they were, they couldn't logistically manage it any longer with managing 4 to 5 or leasing 4 to 5 apartment complexes. They were going to build their own housing, and invited us down to take a look at what they were going to do. And so I'm like, oh my God, we're going to get a consulting gig at Disney. And so I went down and looked at how they were thinking about it. And they're like, well, what do you think? We're like, well, it's not exactly how we would approach it. It's like, well, how would you? And so we took them on a little road trip, showed them how we did things, and they invited us back a couple weeks later, and George said, Bill, how would you all like to privately own the Disney intern program? And it was, of course, I couldn't say yes fast enough. And Disney leased us 150 acres, and we invested $625 million, and built an incredible 10,400 accommodations and privately owned and managed the housing for the Disney employees that implemented their mission. So to have started our company with that poster, I'm like,
Do you have pictures of any of those posters or anything anywhere that has like the Disney?
Yeah, I have. When we went public, it turned it into a PowerPoint slide.
Okay, yeah.
I wish I had the thought of keeping it.
Yeah, it's the stuff movies have made.
Only in America.
Yeah,
only in America. So just incredible in terms of, you know, I have lived the American dream, and only in this country could a story like mine ever happen.
Give people a sense of the scale and scope that aren't familiar with, like number of campuses.
So American Campus grew, and I guess I should get to the end of the story. In August of 22, we sold to Blackstone for $12.8 billion.
Okay.
And so, you know, the IPO was $200 million.
That'll work.
And we housed over 140,000 students at 92 campuses.
Wow.
And so we developed over $8 billion for our own account for our university clients. And it was an incredible opportunity that we
30-ish no's with poster boards to one yes to one miracle funding to those numbers.
And Prairie View A&M, I think, and I think American Campus is doing the 11th phase. Even after I left, we did 10 when I was there. Just kept on building on President Hines' vision.
That's unbelievable. Well, congratulations! Just listening to that, I mean, it's so impressive.
Unbelievably blessed.
It is hard. I mean, if you weren't sitting here, like it would be like one of those that. If you saw it in a movie, you'd be like, "Oh, that's not believable."
And it's all about the people. It's all about the culture. In terms of, you know, everyone that was part of it always felt like we were doing something much bigger than ourselves and much bigger than real estate.
Yeah. So tell me about that, because I think that feels transferable to whatever industry you're in, wherever you're leading. You know, you're so huge on culture.
Absolutely.
What does that mean to you? What are some of the tenets of that?
Culture is everything.
Yeah.
And you know, there's two things we always focused on throughout the organization and throughout my whole career. And candidly, you know, my philosophy that I'm about to take you through was in part formed by my own experiences early in my career that were the opposite of what I'm about to go through. It's like I didn't like the way that I was treated and the opportunities I was given. So it's like, okay, we're going to do it differently. And so the first thing I always talked about was trust. Yeah. Trust is everything. And so your employees and the team members have to be comfortable making mistakes, have to be comfortable failing. And when people make mistakes and fail, you can't, you know, be so hard on them. We learn, you know, I always tell an employee when they made a mistake, you're more valuable today than you were yesterday because you've learned something. Yeah. And so you got to create a culture where people are entrepreneurial, they're willing to take chances, they're willing to take risks, and when they do, they own it, they admit it, they immediately, if something goes wrong, they bring it to light, and you all move forward together. Yeah. The other thing that we always talked about was an open door policy. And by an open door policy, what we'd always say, you know, I worked at a company where the ivory tower didn't want to hear it. And, you know, wait your turn, slow down, don't bring me a problem, or you get your head bit off, and so everybody just sat there and didn't bring problems in. But we always said, you get paid to have an opinion. And if you believe that the company is not implementing the right strategy or making a mistake in what we do, you have an obligation to come question the authority in the company, whether it's your direct supervisor or going into Bill's office. And so, and I'll always tell our team, whether you're a general manager, a VP, a senior vice president, or a C-level officer, when anyone cares enough to come in and challenge us, here's the process you got to go through. You sit down with that employee and you go through, well, here was the problem we were facing. Here's what we analyzed. This is how we prioritized the outcomes we wanted. And this is the logic of why we made the decision. You're mentoring. Someone cared enough. Now you're getting a chance to explain to someone at a level they may not have yet been able to be exposed to how we think about it, how we prioritize and what we value and why we did what we did. Wow. And so mentoring takes place. Now, what would happen sometimes in those meetings is as you went through that logic, the employee team member that may be much closer to the field and the actual problem was taking place says, hey, as you were going through what you evaluated, I didn't hear you mention this. And it's like, it's because I didn't know about this. Tell me more. And so in that environment, when you're making a mistake because you didn't think through everything, you did misprioritize, your team comes forth and tells you. Wow. And then the third potential outcome of that is after you go through and explain why you did what you did, the employee may say, "Oh, well, I understand it, but I just I don't agree with the decision." It's like, well, hey, we can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Well, let's all get on board and do it.
Yeah.
And so that culture, it makes people feel so a part of it and so comfortable. And it did. You know, I think a lot of companies don't reach their full potential because the mistakes they're making never come to light until it's too late and really cost money or opportunities. And so that culture was one that we just lived it every day.
Wow.
And so to walk by the offices, you'd see people debating and arguing passionately. Now, let's go get a beer.
Yeah.
And so
I love it.
It was just paramount. The other thing that we always talked about from a leadership perspective, and then this is, for anyone, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what your business is, when you hire people, and you always hire the best. And what happens so often is when we're interviewing someone for a job, is we hire people we're comfortable with versus people that are really the best for the job. When I would interview somebody that wanted my job, and I'm like, oh my God, they're better than me at this, they're better than me at this, got to get them in the organization. So many times people's own insecurities are like, oh, I'm going to hire who I'm comfortable with that I think will do what I need them to do, and hiring someone that is just the most talented, ambitious person you can get into the organization. And when people realize that as a manager, when you have the ability to recruit the best people and give them the best opportunities, that's how you rise into C-level management. Ultimately, at C-level, that's all you're doing, is recruiting teams, mentoring teams, and getting those teams to collaborate. It's not the functional expertise of that area. And so that whole thing about hiring people that you're threatened by perhaps versus that you're comfortable with, and the open door policy and trust, that's really the secret sauce. What makes it all happen.
Wow. There's this interesting dual, like, humility and confidence that you exude when you talk about that. Like, that is, willing to lead into a lot of these unpredictable scenarios, yet humble enough to listen to and empower.
Well, and I've always, if I started naming the people that I've been blessed to hire, that have just, again, carried me in so many cases, but when you're willing to hire people and give them the opportunity to make mistakes and allow them to be entrepreneurial and work with them and mentor them and to allow that culture to take place, it is just unbelievable. I mean, we really felt like family. Truly, it was work hard, play hard, and the business success was part of an incredible amount of personal relationships that took place, and we loved it. We loved what we did.
Wow.
It was hard to leave.
Yeah,
it was hard to leave.
Yes. Well, I have two final questions. One specific to you, and one we kind of ask as a final question to every guest. So specific to you, I'm thinking that there would be a lot of people out there with an idea, a dream, something they want to chase, something they want to pursue or start, or maybe go all in on something. How did you, when you were getting so many people saying this isn't going to work, this isn't a good idea, there's no opportunity there, how do you discern the difference between like wise counsel from somebody who's been ahead of you or knows more than you, and when is the right time to keep driving and put your head down and be like, no, there's something here?
But and again, it's if it's to be, it's up to me. And so if you believe it, and you believe I truly believe you can, and I'm a very spiritual person, almost became a priest. God's very important in my life and in my family's life. Karma, spirituality, I believe your thoughts, your words truly can be manifested in what happens. And so if you believe it, if you work as hard as you can for it, if you never give up, yes, you'll have challenges and you'll have failures. That's part of it. You can't have success without failure. There's no such thing. And so you have to keep driving through those things, period. And so just don't give up. Outwork people. Just keep going. At the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Well, then our final kind of question that we love to ask all guests is, I'm thinking, especially because you're not that far from this big transition in your career, where you're at in your story, what inspires you today, this season of life, this moment?
The thing that I regret, I do have one regret in my career, and that is I was terrible in the early days of the company in the balance of family and work. And I missed my children growing up, truly. It chokes me up. Making that up for that with the grandkids. Got 5 beautiful grandchildren, absolutely the center of my universe. You got to find the balance. And so you can still have all that drive, all that ambition, but don't forget what really matters in life. And so the one thing I would say to people is, go accomplish your dreams, but never lose sight of why you're doing it in the first place. For me, it was to be a provider and to make sure my family was taken care of. Okay, if you're not there for the quality moments and the time, you got the wrong priorities. And so I learned that a little later in my career. As I'm still now pursuing a new career, I'm doing it in that fashion, more balance. And I try when I mentor young people to have them learn that lesson and not make the same mistake that I did in that regard. Wow. I was going to retire when I thought, what a perfect ending when we sold the Blackstone and Time to Rot in the Horizon. 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh my God, I got to go do something. I couldn't sit around. And so I have started a new company called Maslow's Properties, after Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Goes back to West Virginia. Just when, the same thing that was the vision for American Campus, Psychology 101, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is every individual's search for meeting the most basic needs of shelter and security, ultimately to a sense of belonging and community and becoming the best self-actualization, the best they can be. And I've always thought that real estate and the sticks and the bricks is the source by which, whether you're building apartments, student housing, offices, whatever the case is, the real estate, and when you bring the programming and the management into it, you create the intangible environment that allows people along that journey of Maslow's hierarchy. So name the new company Maslow's Properties. Initial focus is on affordable workforce housing. I feel like that's something the real estate market has neglected to provide. Austin's a great example of how many people that make $15 to $25 an hour can't afford to live anywhere near where they work. Yeah. And so that's the next passion we're going to pursue and see if we can have some level of success.
Wow. Well, I feel like your words, especially about family, there's like a double weight to them because of your success. You're on, you've experienced that success and still speak to it. It's just, it's deeply meaningful. So I appreciate you. And
totally.
Grateful for this conversation today. So thank you, sir.
Awesome. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you.
We loved it.
Appreciate it.